again, welcome back to Lost My Thread. I'm Teresa and this is my July Makes video where I'm going to tell you about everything I sewed last month. I feel like I might as well start with what I'm wearing now. This is the Sew Over It Betty dress in a gorgeous Ankara fabric that I know I'm never going to be able to really show you on video, but I really love how it turned out. So this is a dress by Sew Over It. It's called the Betty dress, very popular, well-loved pattern throughout the sewing community. It's got a full circle skirt at the bottom, which is just so much fun and really makes the most of this wonderful fabric. I made this dress as part of the Ankara Appreciation Week over on Instagram, and it is really fun fabric to use and wear. I've never used Ankara fabric before. It's also called African wax print fabric. I did talk a little bit more about it in my sewing plans video when I told you about the things that I was planning to make this summer. So I'll link to that if you want to check that out. But this dress, I will say, I'm not 100% in love with the fit of it. It's been a bit of a journey getting to this point with the fit of the bodice. I made 3 different muslins. The first one that I made, the main issue was this neckline was just all the way, the sleeves, or the straps rather, the straps along the sleeve, the shoulders. The shoulder straps, I don't know what my issue is. The shoulder straps were way over, and my bra straps were going to be like right here, and these straps of the dress were going to start about here. I think it is possibly supposed to have a bit of a boat neck feel, but this is meant to be the rounded neck add-on from the add-on pack. And yeah, it just didn't seem to fit me quite right. So I had originally just made the straight size 13 because it actually claimed to be made for a C bust cup size, which is my difference between my high bust and my full bust is 3 inches, which is a C sewing cup. And so I thought maybe it'll actually work, because if you do the size 13, that is dead on. So between the 12 and the 14, it is dead on my bust, waist, and hip measurement. So I thought, easy, it's going to fit me really well. But I did make a muslin, and it was just all kinds of awful. Now, I have had problems before where things are a bit big in this area, and I don't think I have a particularly narrow chest, but I just feel like this area is a bit small for me. And so I decided what I would do is I would size down a couple of sizes and do a bit of a bigger FBA. That did not work. So that was muslin number 2, definitely way worse. I then had a little look at ways that I could just remove the extra bulk. So when it was so loose along here, I could pinch out 4 inches in total. That was just too much. So I found a really cool technique. I think it was on the Cashmerette website, and I will put a link down below because it was a really useful thing to try out, and it worked really well for me, where basically I just pinched out that 4 inches, or I removed that from the top of the bodice, and then I just sort of made a little straight line down to where the bottom of the hem should be, and it just angled the top of it in somewhat. And I believe I did end up adding a little bit, I didn't even need a full bust adjustment actually. I stuck with just that. I lowered the bust darts by 1 inch just because they were a bit high for my body anyway. I did a 1/2 inch forward shoulder adjustment, which is a pretty standard adjustment for me. And surprisingly for me, the bodice, actually the waist, was a little bit too high. Usually for me, it's the other way around. I'm quite short-waisted, so I feel like usually the waist I have to raise on a lot of patterns, but this one I had to lower it by 3/4 of an inch, and it sits perfectly where it is right now. I feel like this is definitely good enough for a dress to wear and to love, but it's not perfect. So I'm not entirely convinced by the Betty dress. The full circle skirt I am all about. Definitely want to make some more full circle skirted dresses in the future. But I'm just not sure if I might prefer to go for a bodice that I know fits me better than try to faff around and make this any better than it is. I feel like it's just not for my body shape. I feel like it's made for somebody else's body shape. But you know, partly it is just because I've made other bodices that fit me better. But like I said, I still really love it, and it's still a lot of fun to wear, and I really did enjoy sewing with this fabric and styling this kind of fabric on my body. The fabric is definitely the star of the show. I did some really great, and this is me being like, look, I'm not a perfectionist. I don't aim for perfection, but when I do well, I praise myself, and I am proud. And I did some really awesome pattern matching along the back of this dress. I can try and show you just because that might come across on the video, but I did it all along this invisible zipper hopefully you can hear me, all along this invisible zipper, and it turned out really well. I used a tutorial from Jerry and Stitches. I'll link to that as well. Jerry and Stitches has a really great YouTube tutorial about pattern matching, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work with the invisible zipper, but it did. And this invisible zipper, I have to say, I'll talk to you about a skirt that I made as well, but I didn't baste it. I didn't even pin it. I just held it with my hands and stitched it in place, which is like, who am I? I don't even know who would do that. But apparently I would do that, and I did it, and it turned out really well. So I'll tell you more about that when I get to the skirt that I made, because that is partly why I decided to go for that way of putting in the invisible zipper. But that is my Sew Over It Betty dress. The next thing I'm going to tell you about, I probably should just tell you about the skirt because then it'll make a lot more sense. This is the Patti pocket skirt by Amy Nicole Studio. This fabric is like one of my favorite fabrics ever in my life that I have owned and worn. It is just phenomenal. I am so obsessed with this fabric. This is another Ankara fabric, Ankara wax print, African wax print fabric. Oh, the one that I'm wearing, I should say, I got from Middlesex Textiles, this fabric. This one came from Diligent Hands fabric, and Diligent Hands, they actually have an Etsy shop and I ordered through them. Really great customer service. The order came through super fast with this fabric as well, so really impressed with Diligent Hands. But the fabric is so wonderful. This dress, or sorry, this skirt, I'm showing you the back. How rude of me. It's got these double box pleats at the back. If you turn it around, you'll understand why it's called the Patti pocket skirt. This skirt is all about those pockets, and the pockets go underneath the pleat, so they are so huge. I did a little reels on my Instagram where I showed how much stuff I could fit in these pockets. They are mega. So if you want to see that, head over to my Instagram. I'm at Lost My Thread over there. But this skirt was a lot of fun. One of the things that I was just so over the moon with this skirt was the construction method. I was aware of this with her patterns. I'm such a big fan of the way that she actually has her instructions set out. So what she'll try and do is minimize the amount of times you're having to move from the sewing machine to the serger to the iron and back and forth and round and round. And she will get you to stitch as many seam edges together as you can, do as many seam finishes as you can at one time, do as much pressing as you can at one time, and then you kind of move around between those stages. So rather than just focusing on one element of the garment, you're doing as many of that step of the process as you can at one time. So it does make the whole process move much quicker. And this is what she knows from her experience of working in the fashion industry. This is how they were going to be, professionally making clothes. And that is something that I have tried to do in my own practice, but I've definitely gotten caught out before when a pattern, maybe I didn't realize that this bit needed to be attached before I then attach it to another piece. So it's really nice that you can just follow along in this really, I would say, satisfying way to bring those garments together. Her sewing patterns are also designed with the petite sewist in mind, so I think from like 5'2" to 5'3". I'm 5'6", so I did have to lengthen this skirt a little bit. This is also designed as well to sit at your natural waist, but I didn't want it to be quite so high, so I actually sent her an email and said, my thought was that if I just made a bigger size, that the waist measurement was going to be more kind of around my belly button where I wanted this skirt to sit. Can I just size up and it will still fit me okay overall? Because there's no sort of crotch seam or anything like that that might get shifted out of place. She thought that that would work, but she said that I might want to think about the waistband, because the waistband is meant to be straight and it might just end up riding up to my natural waist and not really sit how I want it to. So I was so impressed, honestly. She got back to me within the same day with some really nice advice, and I ended up curving the waistband. So I looked at where I wanted the top of the skirt to sit. I then measured down the length of the waistband and measured around that point to see what the difference was between those two measurements. And in the end, for my body, that was 2 inches. So I ended up looking at what was going to be 2 inches shorter at the top of the waistband compared to the bottom. And I ended up kind of curving it along to make that fit. I can do a video on what I've done with that because I've done it with other patterns before if anyone's interested. But essentially I created a curved waistband so that it fits perfectly right where I want it to, and it doesn't shift or move around because it just, it's that kind of shape as my body is, and it fits really well. And like I said, it's just so much fun to wear. As far as the sizing, because I did want it to sit a bit lower on my body, I ended up making a size 18. So I think on her pattern, if I was going with my own natural waist, I think I was maybe supposed to be like a size 10. So I definitely made a pretty different size, but that's just because I didn't want it to sit at the smallest point of my waist. And yeah, I really love that skirt. It's so much fun and it goes with so much because of all the colors on it. It's one that I know that I'm going to wear a lot. Hey guys, Teresa from the future here. I had to cut this back in because I realized that there were some things that I didn't mention that I wanted to talk about. One thing that I thought was really important to share that I really enjoyed about working with Nicole's patterns is she's very big on the idea of using pins as little as physically possible, which means pretty much not using pins apart from the very rare occasion where she thinks that they are essential, which would be, you know, occasionally matching up notches and things like that. Obviously, it will depend on the kind of fabric that you're using, but this was a very stable cotton fabric, so I thought I could have a go and try to avoid using pins. And I pretty much used pins, I think, in about 2 places on the waistband, and that includes on the invisible zipper. So the invisible zipper, which I want to show you, but also you shouldn't be able to see. This is, I think, the neatest invisible zipper I've ever done in my life, and I installed it without any pins. So very much like the Betty dress, Nicole is very big on, you can use pins or you can baste, but you don't need to use those things to put in an invisible zipper. Just guide the zipper into the teeth. It will go where it wants to go. I don't know how, but it worked and it was amazing. The other thing I wanted to mention with this dress is I didn't quite have enough fabric. I mentioned this in my sewing plans video. I knew that I didn't have quite a big enough piece to be able to make all of this skirt with this fabric. So I did a bit of a contrast in some of the areas, which I think turned out really cute. So the inside of the pockets are actually lined with this. It's a hot pink linen, a watermelon pink linen that I had left over from a dress that I made last month. So I can link to my previous month's makes if you want to see what that fabric was or what it was originally used for. And then I also used the same fabric on the inside of the hem, so the hemband on the inside. So these are parts of the skirt that were not going to be visible, so I felt like I could get away with using this contrasting fabric, but I think it really adds something to it, to be honest. I think it's a cute detail. And this hem, which is a big old hem, I hand stitched the hem as well, so I don't know how much you'll be able to see. Again, you shouldn't ideally be able to see very much. This is the inside. And then on the outside, you might be able to see a few little marks here and there where it's stitched together. So because of my lack of hemming, which some of you can relate to, I thought I would have a go at hemming by hand and just kind of make the most of it. And I'm glad that I did. So those were some key details that I wanted to share with you. Let's get back to the original video now. The next thing I'll tell you about is my Pona jacket by Helen's Closet Patterns. I know a lot of you were very excited to see this one completed, so I'm very happy to show you my black linen Pona jacket. Now, black never comes up well on the camera. Hopefully you can see. It's kind of like an oversized suit jacket or blazer jacket, so it's all generally a bit big for my proportions, but that is the design of it. It's got little pockets here at the front, if you can see them, I don't know. This one I had a lot of fun with the finishing on the inside. So as you can probably see, I used a little bit of a fun bias binding, little black and white polka dot bias binding around the inside edge here. I did it along the inner edge of the facing. I did it along the inside of the hem. I also added it to the inside of the pocket. Not that anyone's ever gonna see that but me. But I mean, I'm the most important person as far as I'm concerned with enjoying my own clothes. I also added to the inside of the sleeve hem. Again, no one's gonna know that that's there but me, but it makes me happy to know that it's there. I do wanna add a little hook just so that I can hang this a bit more easily, but it's got a little collar going around. It doesn't have a proper collar stand, but it's got a little collar going around. I really like the way that this one came together. It didn't really take me that long, I felt, considering that I added all this extra bias binding, even at the shoulder seam I added this bias binding. But I just think it has a really cool look to it. This was one that I was inspired by somebody's version that I saw over on Instagram. They made a linen Pona jacket, and I thought it looked really cool and very versatile, and I thought it would be something really great to have in black, just goes with everything, right? So I do think that I'm gonna wear this one a ton. I know it's also gonna soften a bit with wash and wear because at the moment it's relatively stiff, and that's just because I've been pressing it as I've been going along, and iron really likes to press, and it will soften as I wear it, and I will have taken some photos. By the time I'm filming this, I have not yet photographed this jacket, but I know by the time that I post it, I'll be able to share some photos so you can see what it looks like on me. I did make a waist tie for this. So I had added a little channel as well for the waist tie, but I actually didn't like how it looked in the end. There was a version on Helen's Closet Patterns blog where she showed you how to add a waist tie with like a little angled end to the tie. But her version was the longer, so I made the shorter version of this jacket. There's also a longer version, and I think the tie probably makes more sense on the long version, but not so much on the short. So I will probably share some photos so you can see what it looks like tied up, but I feel like it doesn't really add anything to me. And also when it's not tied, the ties are pretty long and they just look a bit awkward hanging on there, so I'd end up taking them off if I wasn't using the tie anyway. But because it's linen, it kind of just closes over itself and it doesn't like flap around a load, so I feel like I can just cozy up, and if I feel like I need to, if it's just a little bit chilly. But that was a really fun one. I wasn't sure if that style was going to work for me when I first made it, and I wanted to have a lightweight summer jacket kind of along the lines of a denim jacket, but I necessarily want denim. I feel like this is very much the vibe that I was hoping for, and it turned out really well. The last two things I'm going to tell you about, I don't have to physically show you because they're things that I've given away as gifts, but I do want to tell you about them. The first one I'll tell you about, I've got a couple to tell you, I'm kind of deciding which order to go in. The next one I'll tell you is one that I have a bit of kind of emotional ties to, and so it's a little bit harder probably to talk about on a camera, but I've talked about it on my Instagram and I've talked about it to people close to me anyway. But I made a pair of pajamas for one of my nieces. She's 9 years old. She had a little sister. It's a horrible way to talk about this. A few years ago, 2019, I made a pair of pajamas for my niece and her little sister. And since that time, we have now lost her little sister. Her little sister really sadly died of cancer later the year after I made the pajamas in 2019. Because I had made a pair of pajamas for these two sisters, and this time I was making a pair of pajamas for just the one sister, it was really hard. It was really a lot harder than I thought it would be, and I thought it would be hard. I think about my little niece that's not with us a lot anyway. She's in my heart and she's on my mind a whole lot. She was a really special little girl. And her big sister has been through some stuff, and I'm pretty amazed and impressed with how well she's coped and how strong she's been and how much she's done. She's been on like BBC programs and written on a BBC blog site to talk about her experience of losing her sister and coping during lockdown, and it amazes me how much she's done to potentially help other children in similar situations. She's awesome. So I really, I wanted to make something nice and special for her, but of course the whole way along I was conscious that I feel like I should be making pajamas for two nieces, not for one. And what particularly made it hard was when I was looking at the sewing pattern that I pulled out. Somehow, I don't know why, I wasn't expecting this, I had the body measurements for both of my nieces on there. And that really was hard to see, and it just hit me in the face, Grief will hit you at all kinds of times, right? This one isn't hugely surprising, but it was pretty tough. I cried a lot making these pajamas for my niece. I cried a lot talking about it, crying a little now anyway, but yeah, I cried a lot on writing my Instagram post about it, reading people's kind comments. Main thing is, I made some awesome pajamas for my niece, and I hope she really loves them. It's a Love Notions pair of patterns, so it's the Girls Classic Tee and the Leggins pattern. The Leggins pattern is a free sewing pattern made for quite a few ages of children. I feel like these ones, the fit has always been like pretty spot on, worked really well for their age. My niece, who I made them for this time around, she's pretty tall for her age, so I did size up. I just basically made them a bit longer, just so that it'll hopefully last a little bit longer for her. But when I've seen her in them, they look like they fit now, so I don't know if they're necessarily going to stretch a whole lot longer. But you know, you do what you can. With kids that are growing, it's difficult to gauge that. I used a really cute constellation themed fabric for these. This was a cotton jersey from Minerva. I really enjoyed this fabric. I really love thinking about space when I'm trying to fall asleep, dreaming or imagining about distant planets and floating through space in a rocket ship, that kind of thing. That's a bit weird and personal, but for me it's a good kind of bedtime vibes. I feel like being a bit dreamy and sleepy all go together. So I thought that would be a fun general theme, but my niece is also she's just a very inquisitive person. She's really intelligent. She's really interested in learning about stuff. And I know that they, you know, do look up at the stars and things. I doubt she's necessarily gotten all into the constellations, but I thought would be an interesting thing for her to potentially think about and, you know, dream about as she's drifting off to sleep. So this was my fun little idea that I had for her. I did also add a really cute sewing label into these that seemed appropriate, not just for her, but for any kid, to be honest with you, or any person. I think I could easily put these into some of my own clothes, but it felt like an appropriate one for her. And even more appropriate, the niece that I have lost, that is no longer with us, her name was Rosie, and this company that makes these labels is called Little Rosy Cheeks. So it had an extra unexpected poignancy when I was putting this label in. My niece really loves it. They fit her really well. And yeah, that's one thing that I've given away. So I've got one more thing to tell you about. I felt like that would have been a bit of an odd place to end, so I wanted to end with something a little bit less emotional, let's say. So the last thing I can tell you about is a top that I made for my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law had bought this really beautiful shirt. It was handmade in Italy. It was this really gorgeous Broiderie Anglais on a cotton gauze fabric. It had really lovely drape to it, really nice and soft. When she asked me if I could maybe make a copy for her because she really liked it and would like to have another one, I thought, yeah, no big deal, why not? I can do that. Didn't really know that much what it would entail, hadn't looked into it that much. I think the hardest part for this was finding the right kind of fabric. There was no way I was going to be able to find really quite the same fabric that she had. I'm not able to get any kind of gauze or double gauze Broiderie Anglais. I certainly couldn't find anything like that. But what I did find, I think, was a pretty good match, or certainly along the same lines. It was a Robert Kaufman Broiderie Anglais, so it's a 100% cotton fabric that I got from Minerva. When I first got it, I wasn't sure if it was going to work because it was looking like the embroidery just really kind of sat on the fabric, if that makes any kind of sense. But when I washed it, it got a little bit of a slightly crinkly feel to it, which was more what I was aiming for. So it was a lot better after I washed it. So if you order this kind of fabric, be aware it probably will change as you wash it. I decided to make it slightly different from the original version. So the original version, around the neckline and the armhole, there was basically just the edge was serged and then folded over and stitched in place. But I prefer for like a lightweight fabric to have a bias bound finish on the inside of the neckline and the armholes. So I made bias binding from the fabric, and that was what I used. And I do feel like that is a bit of a neater finish. I also added a sewing label to her top. I add sewing labels sometimes just for fun, but more often for function. If I feel like it's not easy to tell the front from the back, that's when I'll add a sewing label. So that was why I added the one onto my niece's leggings, and that's why I wanted to add one onto this shirt, because it's not necessarily that obvious when you pick it up what the front and the back are. And the sewing label, this is another one from Little Rosy Cheeks, and I thought it was a really sweet sentiment, so I thought it was a good one to use, and I hope it makes her happy when she sees this top. I had intended to just serge the edges, the bottom edges of this top, but I realized it actually was a rolled hem when I was looking at the one that she had bought, and I had never done a rolled hem on my serger before. I ended up using a tutorial that Sam from Frugalissima made. She has the same serger as me, coincidentally, so that made it a bit easier. I did also have to play around quite a lot with the stitch length and sort of different elements of the serger that I've never really touched before. It took a while to get it just right, but I ended up figuring out how to do a really nice, neat rolled hem with this fabric. It worked out well. The only thing that made it even more of a challenge though is it had a side slit. And so basically what you need to do to be able to get that side slit to go through the serger is you open the slit up. So you've got like a little V, this, if you can imagine. Let's go like this. This is the bottom edge of the shirt and you had to open it out completely. Why did I choose those fingers that I'm not going to separate? It was a little V like this, and then you have to open it completely and serge along. I don't know if that makes any sense, guys. But you had to serge along the whole thing, straightening out this little bend. And I was worried that it was going to end up really splayed and not really sit flat. And it is a little bit like that on one of the sides. And one of the sides I ended up having to do like a little bit of an extra stitching, so there's a slightly extra jaggedy bit. Those are details, honestly, and 100% it looks fine if you weren't being a perfectionist. And I am not a perfectionist about my own sewing. A lot of my things, most of my things have some little slight errors and screw ups in it, and I really don't care. But when I'm sewing for other people, I want them to be really just right. And I did so many tests, and it turned out perfectly with my tests. And of course, when I'm doing the real deal, it doesn't sit quite as flat as I would like. But I am very much of the school of thought of thinking about the 3-foot roll. If you saw this from 3 feet away, does it look good? It looks great from 3 feet away. So I'm not going to beat myself up about it. But just between you and me, it could have been a little bit better, but I'm still really happy with how it turned out. And the bottom line is my mother-in-law really loves it. It fits her, it looks great. I think it is a pretty good copy. It doesn't have quite the same drape because it is more of a crisp cotton fabric. But I think it is really beautiful in the end anyway, and I know that she's really happy with it. So definitely a win for me. I do hope you enjoyed hearing about what I made in the month of July. You should definitely be hitting that subscribe button if you are new to my channel, if you haven't subscribed yet and you are enjoying my videos, and I will see you all again very soon. Bye!